the workout cannot be rigid. You know, in the beginning, I didn't understand enough to not be rigid. You know, if I had to do a certain workout or lift a certain weight, however my body felt, you're going to do it and that's it. You know what I mean? No discussion.
With the wisdom that you have now, what would you have done back then in order to still achieve your goal? You still want to maximize everything you can. How might that look, like knowing what you know now? At 62, we're talking 62 years old. I'm looking at you right now. You're looking like you are in incredible shape. Are you quite lean as well right now under that Superman shirt?
Yeah,
That's like
yeah,
a
yeah. I'm pretty lean actually. I'm about 215 right now. So maybe about 15 pounds from competition weight, roughly. The way I'm holding this weight right now is probably the leanest I've been since I've stopped competing. So I feel really good, you know, and I'm just, thank God, you know, to know that my body's healthy, strong, fit, very able, good mobility, no high blood pressure, no diabetes, you know, no health issues, just being an example to my clients and to anyone that I come in contact with, to know that just because, you know, you get into your 60s, you know, you don't have to look old and feel old. You can be far better than that. You just got to learn how to take care of this gift.
That's amazing. That's inspiring. Of course, your workouts have evolved since when you were competing as heck, I would say teens, but even in your 20s and 30s, maybe even in your 40s and 50s. What's that looking like now? Like, what was it like back then, and how has it evolved since now that you're in your 60s?
The biggest change I could say is understanding more about your body's recovery. Because, you know, I competed from 1980 to 2004, so that was a pretty long time for me because I had no idea that I was going to even last that long, and to have won my first competition in 1981 when I won the Teenage Hercules, and then the last competition in 2004 at 41 where I won the Masters in the Open division in the Mr. Natural New York City. So for me, my body was steadily changing during my competitive career. And, you know, I started out training 6 days a week, 4.5 hours a day, and that lasted for like 5 years. And then I had to cut it back to 5 days a week, 2.5 hours. And then that went on for maybe another 4 years. Then I cut it back to 4 days a week, training Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Then that lasted until I was probably in my mid 30s. And then I had to change it to a 3 day a week routine. Now, currently, I lift weights every other day. The days that I don't lift, I do cardio. I go for a bike ride, work on core, work on flexibility. You know, I was one of the first bodybuilders to do a full split in competition. I started doing that in 1983. So I'm a very big advocate of the importance of working on flexibility, because a lot of times people think that stretching is something that's not as important as cardio and as lifting, but it's extremely important. At this stage of the game, I would say I'm much more efficient with the way I train. Let's say for abs, for example, there was a time when I did 900 reps of abs of core work 6 days a week, and that would take about 30 minutes. And then that went to 3,000, and that took 1 hour. When I changed that, I went down to 300 reps. And then now it's probably not even 30 reps. So in other words, in the beginning, when I was training 4.5 hours, I did about 25 sets per body part. Right now, if I do, I would say between 6 or 8 hard sets in a workout, that's about the maximum number. So I try to reduce volume and raise the level of efficiency. Once I get past the warm-up sets, I'll just try to train at a very intense pace, and I try to do every rep as perfectly as possible. You know, one of the things I said in the beginning when I started training, you know, not knowing how to train, I needed the volume, because if I did 10 reps, maybe I did 6 out of 10 well, and then the next 4 reps, my form was getting kind of shaky. But what I had in the beginning was an extreme amount of effort. I would go as hard as I could to failure as possible, even if my form was less than perfect. But I tried to do everything as perfectly as I could. But over the years, that 60% went to 70, then 80, then 90, you know, to the point where I'm so in tune to how to execute every exercise and every rep that I could literally feel the muscle's presence in that movement. I know if the muscle is engaging at 70% or 80% or beyond 80%. So now when I complete a set or complete a workout, I know how deeply I went into the workout to really maximize what my body could do without feeling like the effort was a little bit reserved or conservative. I know my body gave me everything that it had. I know how to start a set well, and I know how to finish it well. So in doing that and being able to monitor my recovery, I'm not trying to train and do the same workout or the same weight week to week, because the body's not a machine that could just perform the same all the time. We have so many internal and external things that affect our performance. It's sleep pattern, it's nutritional pattern, it's stress pattern, it's environmental. We can get up and it's a beautiful, warm, sunny day, and the day gives us a certain amount of energy because we look at it and we're like, man, it's beautiful out there. And then you can get up and it's raining and it's cloudy and it's cold, and right away you're like, oh man, what an ugly looking day today. And again, that affects your energy. We could have the stress that affects us through relationships, through paying bills. You know, when something worries us, it affects how our body's energy can perform. So all of these things are so many different variables that exist in the body's overall performance. So by understanding how to relate to that, the workout cannot be rigid. You know, in the beginning, I didn't understand enough to not be rigid. You know, if I had to do a certain workout or lift a certain weight, however my body felt, you're going to do it and that's it. You know what I mean? No discussion. But now I could get up and my body feels a certain way, and I could have had a particular workout in mind, and all of a sudden my body's like, no, we're not doing that workout today. This is not the way I feel. We're not going to go this heavy. We're not going to do this particular exercise. We're going to change it. We're going to go lighter. We're going to execute perfect form, and I'll give you something rather than nothing. You know, so are you going to compromise, or are you going to risk getting hurt? Which is it? So I've become very internal with being able to feel where my body wants to be led. And when my body is not up to doing a particular workout, I don't get into an argument over it. I just say, okay, you're not feeling like this? Okay, then whatever you tell me that is the workout that's going to be more suitable for you today, then that's what we'll do. I don't get into like that rigidness where I tell my body like, hey, we're gonna bench 300 pounds a day, we're gonna squat 300 pounds, and if you don't feel like it, it's too damn bad, we're doing it anyway. I'm no longer that guy, because I realize at this stage, you're playing for the long game. You know, sometimes, you know, when you go from, you know, the peak of your body's performance, like when I could squat 600 pounds and, you know, for 10 reps and bench 315 for 8 and curl 225 pounds for 8 reps, your body changes. And all of a sudden now you're benching 2 1/4 for 10. Now you're squatting 2 1/4 for 10 and you're happy. You know, now you're curling, you know, like half of what you used to be able to curl, and you're still telling yourself, man, this is great. You know, so your perspective has to shift, because you got to understand no athlete is going to train at their peak forever. We're going to age, we're going to accumulate injuries, our body's going to change, and you have to change with that relationship. You can't be rigid. You can't look at your body and say, oh, you used to do this, this, and that, and now look at you. You're not as strong as you used to be. No, you have to be grateful that this body is still functioning at a high level. It doesn't matter if it's not the peak level that it used to train at, but you got to understand it's a different stage. It's a different stage and it's a different time. As long as the body is healthy and is going through above average workouts and is performing them well, and you feel fit, you feel strong, you're healthy, you look in the mirror and you say, man, I still look pretty damn good for a guy in his 60s. You know, you have to constantly look at the positive, not dwell on the past and what you used to be able to do and the way you look then versus how you look now. You still look good. You're just a different version of yourself from the younger version.
Do you think that rigidness that you were describing there, is that something you would have instilled in your psychology, your approach earlier on, if you had the wisdom you have now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would have had less injuries had I understood that earlier. You know, I would have had less injuries, because usually I tell people all the time, if athletes are the fittest and healthiest people on the planet, why do they get injured so often? Because you have a high performance body. When the body performs at that max level of performance, you take it for granted and you just want to drive it into the ground, because every time it performs, you know, to that capacity, you expect it to do it again and again and again, because you're not processing what it took out of your body to perform like that. And now you have to kind of scale the workout down in whatever time frame allows your body to recover the way it needs, which is a theory that goes back in the 80s and 90s when bodybuilders were doing workouts and they were calling it cycling, where they would have periods where like pre-contest where you train, heavier, and as you get closer to the show and you start dieting, you train more intensely, you lighten your weights, so there was always a bit of that pattern that existed from before, but we still had some rigidness, because obviously you're training for a show, you want to go in at your best, you want to win. Like one of the examples I would say to people, you're trying to train your body and get as close to the edge of the cliff as possible without falling off. That means you're not holding back. You're going so hard that if you don't see yourself when you approach the edge, that next rep could be the one that takes you off the cliff and you crash and burn and you get hurt. But when you get as close to it as possible, you maximize your body's level of performance without falling off the cliff and hurting yourself. But you have to have that willingness to get as close to that edge as possible to know that your body gave you everything that it had. You don't have to feel like, oh man, that was a good set, but I think I held back a little bit. And for me, part of that was psychological, because when you go into a competition, you need to know that you gave it 100% to know that you could win. If I felt that I didn't give everything I had, as soon as you see another competitor that looks as good as you, maybe better, right away, you say to yourself, you know what? I could have trained a little bit harder. I think that guy's got me today. He probably worked harder than I did. So maybe if I get second, I'll be happy. But if you know you gave 100%, doesn't matter how good your competitor looks. You're looking at him and you're saying, if you're going to win, you're going through me, because I worked so hard preparing for this show that nobody deserves to win more than I do. So that mental toughness, that conviction to know that you prepared yourself to the best of your ability and you're as ready to win as you could be is what carries you through. And for me, winning 18 shows in 9 years, that's not something that I'm just preaching. It's something that I lived, so every time I work like that, I mean, even now saying it sounds kind of ridiculous to me, because I tell people all the time, if I won one show a year consistently, it would have been an accomplishment. But to win that many competitions in such a short span of time, it tells me like, man, dude, what you were doing was crazy. But that was the philosophy that I had back then.
Wow. The approach and how you did things, because you were talking, I caught that. You said 4.5 hour workouts?
Correct, in the beginning.
In the beginning, right? And then that kind of dropped as you got more efficient and your execution got better, and maybe your sets were even getting closer, or if not too true muscular, or I would say just true task failure, right? Like when you're performing an exercise. Is that accurate to say for you?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
So, but you were putting in the work, like you were really putting in the work, and you were not shy about putting in that work. And my question to you is that, let's say you had a workout planned out and you're like, okay, 300-pound bench today, 600-pound squats, like that was on the menu, let's just say, for that week. But you woke up on one of those workouts and where, your body's just not feeling great. With the wisdom that you have now, what would you have done back then in order to still achieve your goal? You still want to maximize everything you can, and you're putting in the work because you have that show coming up. How might that look, like knowing what you know now?
I would have had a different approach, I would have probably changed the weight scheme. I would have looked at it, and maybe thought about doing a superset or a tricep, something that would have kind of gave my body a different plan of attack that didn't rely so much on the weight being as heavy. And I would have paid more attention to my body's recovery. So I knew I had a better understanding of how to cycle those highs and lows with the body's recovery. Because obviously when you're getting ready for a show, you're in that warrior mindset, and your body's the victim.
Yeah.
You're gonna drive it as hard as you can. It's like seeing a race car driver. He wants to win that race. If that car can do 250 miles an hour, he's going to take it to 248 miles an hour. He's just not going to hold back, and not even thinking about, you might blow the engine. No, I got to win the race. That's what I got to do. So I would have thought of a different scheme to go about things. A lot of times when I had to learn a lesson, it was from, pushing my body so hard that I got hurt, that I started to say, oh man, maybe if I wouldn't have done this and I would have dialed it back a little bit, I wouldn't have gotten hurt. So every time you get hurt, there's a lesson to be learned, because obviously getting hurt is not good and you don't want it to happen again. And then now you got to concentrate on how you're going to recover. So with each injury, you got to become a lot more intelligent going forward, because you don't want it to happen again.